Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Wilson, and I am the Director of Education at the Autry Museum of the American West. First, I would like to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of this land, the Gabrielino Tongva people. I would also like to thank the Autry's generous donors and members for making this program happen. I am honored, along with the Board of Trustees, to welcome you to the Artist's Salon. Joining me today is Dr. Dawn Dennis, Lecturer of History at California State University, Los Angeles, and Azalea Camacho, Archivist and Special Collections Librarian at the University Library of California State University, Los Angeles. As a public historian teaching in the CSU, Dr. Dennis collaborates with museums, educators, and libraries in the Los Angeles area. As an alumni of Cal State University Northridge and Claremont Graduate University, her work demonstrates a commitment to a student-centered pedagogy and a public history practice in archival studies and curatorship. Dr. Dennis spent much of her graduate student years in Natchez, Mississippi, working on the Natchez Courthouse Records Project and research about Abdul Rahman, a Muslim slave that emigrated to Liberia with his family. Her work was featured in the 2007 documentary, Prince Among Slaves. Dr. Dennis has curated 4 public history exhibitions with students at Cal State LA. As an educator for more than a decade in Los Angeles, first starting at Mission College in Sylmar, her teaching and research fields are race, ethnicity, and immigration in history, with a particular focus on expressions of white supremacy. Dr. Dennis is currently the project manager for the Big Data Grant at Cal State LA and wants to further create possibilities with big data and the humanities. Dr. Dennis has published a collaborative article on teaching pedagogy in the journal Dialogo, Volume 21, Issue 2. Dr. Dennis published articles that were translated by Dr. Angela Vergara for The Conversation in Cipher Chile. Dr. Dennis is currently a reader at the Munger Research Center at the Huntington Library, Art Collections and Botanical Gardens. Dr. Dennis is also a board member and chair of the program committee for the Historical Society of Southern California and co-coordinator for the DLF Museum Working Group. We also have Azalea Camacho, who is the Archivist and Special Collections Library at the University Library of California State University, Los Angeles, and a current fellow of the Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship for Diversity, Inclusion, and Cultural Heritage. Azalea oversees the operations of Special Collections and Archives Unit, which includes archival processing and maintenance, coordinating the instruction program and public services, and managing the library's exhibits program. Over the past 7 years at Cal State LA, she has worked to strengthen community partnerships and foster student curiosity in the field by providing engaging opportunities for the campus community. She has over a decade of professional experience in archives and special collections, beginning as a library assistant at the UCLA Southern Regional Library Facility and continuing as an archives assistant at Western University of Health Sciences and University Library Archivist to Archivist and Special Collections Library at California State University. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master of Library and Information Science degree with a concentration in archival studies from San Jose University. Before we go any further, I would like to mention that we welcome your questions. And if you have questions during our conversation, I encourage you to please enter them at any time in the Q&A feature that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom window. The Autry Education Department is committed to engaging and supporting the educational needs of all learners. Through our programs and initiatives, we strive to illuminate the histories and cultures of the peoples of the American West, foster a sense of inquiry and discovery, and inspire an ethos of social action and community engagement. Over the past few years, a team at California State University, Los Angeles with help from the Autry Classroom Curators team, has undertaken an incredible archival and educational project centered around Mervyn Dymally. The three of us are going to discuss this project in depth this afternoon. So good afternoon, Dr. Dennis. Good afternoon, Ms. Camacho. My first question to kick us off is, who was Marvin Dymally?
I could get us started off. So Marvin Dymally was born in 1926 and he passed away in 2012. And he was an immigrant from Trinidad and he came to the United States at the age of 19. And he's also a Cal State LA alum. He graduated in 1954 with a bachelor's degree in education. And then he went on to get a master's degree in government from the California State University of Sacramento in 1969 and got a PhD in human behavior from the United States International University, which is now known as Alliant International University. And he got that in 1978. And Dymally's political career started in 1962, and he really made history by becoming the first Black Lieutenant Governor of California, serving from 1975 to 1979. So that gives you a little bit of information, some background on Dymally. I don't know if you want to add anything, Dr. Dennis.
Dymally was an educator. He was an advocate for so many, working class, people of color, undocumented students as well. So he was a politician, but, our focus of this exhibit and what Azalea and I did for the last year was really to just support and to highlight what he did as an educator, an advocate, and, an abolitionist, further than just the political side of it too. Yeah.
So my next question is, why is his story important to learn, share, and celebrate with others?
I think for the most part, for me, when I think about it, and since we do have the collection at Cal State LA and I give access to patrons and students to it, the question that I often get is that they don't know about Marvin Dymally and the history and who he was. And I think that's why it's important to learn about his coalition work. He was a great coalition builder for minorities, people of color, people with disabilities, women. So that's what I learned by working with his collection and processing. And that's what we wanted to celebrate, which is so relevant now and current putting this virtual exhibit really came into with the current times, and the exhibit also brings awareness to Dymally and his work and how current and relevant it is in today's times, and to bring that to students and the community.
I can add to that. One of the things that we wanted to focus on with this exhibit was his work with incarcerated individuals. Dymally went to every state prison. And as a politician, as somebody that is, concerned about the humanitarian element in a carceral state and everything, it was important for us to highlight that. Cal State LA has a program called Project Rebound. And they were very instrumental, along with our collaborative partner, the Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership. We felt it was just important to highlight the narratives and the stories of incarcerated people, because we don't focus on that. We tend to exclude them in society. We don't even think of them sometimes as human. So when my students were in there and they found these letters to me as a wife of somebody who, whose husband was incarcerated, it was important for me that we honor these narratives and do not exclude them from the archive as well. So his work on reforming this institution that seems not to be able to be reformed was so relevant, especially in today's landscape. So.
And then also highlighting those letters that came from incarcerated people in the exhibit gave them voice, and again, it's something that's still relevant today.
Absolutely. So this entire exhibit, this entire process highlights the work of a man that so many of our students did not know. Every one of our students were like, who is Marvin Dymally? We don't learn about him. We don't have a curriculum yet for him, to teach K through 12 and college either. So it's important that we honor that. And as a Cal State alumni, he was very significant. His work with the unions and his work with Richard Alatorre on bilingual education is so important. So Azalea can speak more about that. But, just his work in general gives an inspiration for a lot of our students that are first-time generation. They have not been to college. This is a brand new experience for them.
Would you say that the work that you've been doing is really about uncovering a hidden history?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. I think a lot about Trelaw's archival silences, and I know Azalea does too. And in conversation with Nancy Escalante, my former teaching assistant, who is now at Yale, we talked about, the former archives prior to the 1970s, how they hid stories. They wouldn't collect the narratives of women of color. And it wasn't until Howard Zinn, at the Society of American Archivists meeting in 1970 was like, look, we need to start uncovering these hidden narratives. It's the strength and the fabric of Los Angeles. So Azalea started working on this collection before I brought my students in, and it was just very relevant. And it was just something that we needed to have come out, to show everybody what was going on and his contributions to LA and beyond.
Well, let's talk about that process, or the process of this project and this wonderful online exhibition. And I've heard that the whole project started with a brick. So if you could kind of reveal a little bit further, that'd be great.
I can do that. So Azalea, the semester that I started to kind of, get familiar with the college archives and get to know Azalea as a scholar and as an archivist, I was in the back room. And I walked by a box, and you're not supposed to touch anything. And so I didn't and everything, but I saw this brick. And I'm like, what is this brick? And Azalea was like, it was a brick used in the 1965 Watts Rebellion. And it was part of this collection that she had. And I was like, well, how big is this collection? And she told me how many cubic feet it was, about 300 boxes, a little bit more. And I was like, well, do you want some help on this? Because I had a little experience. And then it kind of grew organically. From that just conversation, from kind of looking to the left and noticing this item that is so significant in our protest and just the whole, Black Lives Matter landscape that we see right now. So that's how it kind of started. And then, we sat down formally and laid out a lot of materials. She can explain that. And on my end as an educator, I had my own assignments too. And we just kind of coalesced together to create this organic project, really.
Yeah, and the reason why those materials were there, or his collection was there, is because I was in the process of working on it and organizing it. So that's why it was there next to my office, really. So I had a couple of carts of materials that I was sorting through from his collection.
Were there a lot of boxes, a lot of carts of materials?
Well, because we have limited space, I had probably about 3 or 2 carts that I was working with specifically at that time. But the storage space that I have, I was organizing them and the materials within the storage space, taking things down and taking things back up. Our storage space is on the 4th floor. Special collections and archives where we process is on the 2nd floor. Luckily, we have elevators, so that helps, and carts we don't have to haul the materials. But yeah, that's what I was working on during that time, and it's been a collection that I've been trying to process on my own, but with other responsibilities that I have in my position, with limited resources that we have, and staff, that it kind of, I would work on it when I had a chance. And so that's the chance encounter that Donna and I had, because we had already worked together, that she happened to see. It's a brick that's encased in sort of a
last case, I thought it was, wasn't it?
It has a little description, and I believe in 2005, Dymally brought that brick to a gathering it was the 40th anniversary of the rebellion, and I think he brought that at that time, because I found this in an article in 2005 when he did that. And so they asked him about the brick, and that's the brick that I think he actually brought in 2005 to talk about during the 40th anniversary in 2005.
Yeah. Azalea and I have worked together before. She helped me curate my first exhibit at the library with my students. And so we had a working relationship at this time, but this is something new. This processing is a whole other ballgame to get involved with, and to make it, 3-4 semesters. It was a long process and everything, but yes, it was that brick for that 40th anniversary. Yeah, I was excited. I was like, what is this right here? So, and Azalea, when you work in the archives with her, she's so welcoming. She's so inclusive. And that's such a different experience that I've had as a researcher in some of these archives, where you can't be inclusive, or they don't want to be inclusive. and you feel like, it's a hierarchy. So Azalea's, archive is so inclusive to my students and everybody's students, really. So.
Well, let's talk about that process, because you had mentioned 3 semesters, which is a year and a half.
Yeah.
So please explain to me everything that you had to do to get the students prepared, and then everything that the students were actually doing, because from what I understand, you weren't just having the students, make lists or take notes. They were actually doing the work of processing these archives.
I can just start. The first classes that we had processed was my race and ethnicity courses. And that was a mindset that I went in. So I came to Azalea, I said, this is a course. These are all freshmen. There are no history students on this list. And that's fine. And I said, let's work it, with our freshmen and sophomore. And so, we came up with the scope of what we were going to do. And that was to really fulfill the requirements of this race and ethnicity course. So Azalea, please,
Sure. When Dawn wanted to include this or Dr. Dennis wanted to include this in her course, I was really excited, because I'm really interested in not only showing students how to do research with primary sources in these types of collections, but really integrating into the process and understanding what it is like to be an archivist on the other side, so that they could become better researchers and kind of demystify special collections and archives as these spaces that seem like museums or like they can't touch the materials, but I wanted to give them a hands-on experience. And it sort of came in line with what Dr. Dennis has wanted to do with her course, as far as being very hands-on and building and developing a learning environment for students. And what I did first is I created an outline of what I proposed to do for her class and separated it into 3 workshops. So training workshops. The first one is, since these students were probably undergraduate students, probably never experienced being in special collections and archives and don't really know what it's about, I did an intro to special collections and archives, highlighting the types of collections that we collect, also giving them a tour of not only the reading room or our public spaces, but our working areas, so they get an understanding of that. And then just showing them how to handle materials like rare books, like documents and photographs, and just giving them an intro, since it probably is their first time. And then the second workshop or training was to get them familiar with Marvin Dymally. And so we showed them a documentary. I did a presentation about Dymally, but then we showed them a documentary that uses the materials within the collection, so they can get a better understanding of his work and the types of materials that they probably would encounter within the collection. And then the third workshop was the actual processing. So not only special collections and archives was new to them, so was Dymally, and so was processing, which is a lot of information for students to take.
You made a handbook too. Remember, you made a little handbook too.
Yeah. A guidebook, which we use for special collections and archive student assistants and volunteers who process collections. So they had that as part of the training, so they can understand, what it takes, all the process to what it takes to process a collection. I also told them the background of the collection, how many boxes, where I was at in the processing of it. I had separated already the collection within its different series, that's what we call it, or different categories of materials. So like correspondence, photographs, ephemera, awards, those types of things. And so the students worked on the correspondence, which I had already separated. And Dymally's collection was pretty organized as far as the correspondence were with the correspondence and those types of things. That also photographs were easy to pull and put together, and still trying to maintain the original order and showing students about that, and talking about what archivists do. So it was a great entryway to show them about what I do as a profession, and also how to work with these materials and make them available for research. So yeah, that third session really was about what they would do. So what they would do with the correspondence, if that was an assigned box for them, and how they would organize that. And if they had photographs, how would they organize that? And then we just had working sessions.
Right.
or
every week.
Every week.
Yeah.
So essentially they did about 2 hours a week, which is very different because as an archivist or even my student assistants spend about 20 hours a week working on a collection. So that kind of gives you an idea. Even prepping a collection for a class of 40 students at once, that's a lot. Luckily, I have student assistants that were able to help in the process of students within those workshops after the actual training and workshops of what they were doing. I had 2 student assistants who are very well versed in processing that helped with when students had questions. So we would walk around, make ourselves available. Students also had the tools they needed that are available to my student assistants and myself, as far as like our acid-free file folders, acid-free boxes, paper clip remover, those types of things, and teaching them why you would remove the staples because it rusts over time. Those types of things. They learn about acid-free folders and why we use that versus the manila folders that came in originally, and they look the same, you know, and labeling and using pencil only. So they learn all those aspects throughout the whole process, and we were there to guide them every step of the way.
So then, I mean, they're learning about your profession and the processes that you have to go through for your work, but then they're also learning your profession, Dr. Dennis, because once you've gone through all this material, then they're learning how to take these primary sources and build a story. Can you talk about then that side of things?
I can. Since the class was race and ethnicity, I had them focus on and just pull out letters that had inflammatory racial language in them. You know, letters about police violence, obviously the letters from incarcerated people, the news clippings from Attica. So that was the course theme. And I'm like, if you see any inflammatory rhetoric that reminds you of what we learned about Aristotle and his racial rhetoric and everything, and his descriptions of Black Americans as just the other, they started to just easily be able to pull out these themes for us. And that was one of the things that we wanted to do as a class, is really connect, you know, they're learning about Aristotle and these philosophers and these early American leaders and everything that believed that Black Americans were not even human. And when you read that in a 1970 letter written from a law enforcement calling Dymally, you know, a bad word and everything, it really kind of, you know, they got excited because they were able to understand how it's important that we understand that Aristotle's theories, like the climate theory or some of his other theories, really resonates today with our own racial problems and tensions and everything. So they read this stuff. They read the letters. They became very immersed in it. And Azalea, you know, she's a historian too. The staff was too, and it was just very nice that we were all on the same page with this. And it's important that they read these primary sources and learn how to develop, you know, historical thinking skills and critical analysis. And we moved into that. The final exam was a critical analysis of one primary source. And we built that foundation around that primary source. I had my colleague, Dr. Kitty Ali, look at my assignment to make sure that it wasn't too hard or, you know, I was missing something. I borrowed extensively from the National Archives on how to set up the assignment, you know, how to, you know, look at the conditions, what words are there, who is this person? And they went so far as to research some of these individuals as well in this correspondence. So, you know, Azalea was there to support, and then I had to rely upon some of my colleagues to make sure that we were doing our job as historians, you know, critical thinking, historical thinking skills for these freshmen.
And I'd like to add to that, because even though they were processing, it was really important for us, like they're learning the processing aspect of it, but as they were looking through the materials, they were selecting materials that related to what they were learning in class, as well as flagging them. So we would take boxes and scan them because they were flagging them for a potential exhibit, which we thought was going to be physical, right? So
we didn't even have the grant,
which turned out to be a virtual exhibit, but they were flagging them. And through the process, we started to come up with these themes.
Yes.
And the students came up with, so we had, remember, Dawn, we had them, we photocopied
and we went to different tables. Yes.
And separated them into themes.
Yeah.
And that's when we started working on the label writing assignment.
Right. And the label writing was the History 3450 Urban History course and everything. So Azalea, yeah, we set it up, we divided them out, and they had fun. And you want students to be in the archives, enjoying that space, learning something, and then contributing to what we think is new knowledge. We did not even have our Cal Humanity grant at this time. We just had a vision. And we're like, we're going to do this exhibit together. Let's just do this. And then during the pandemic, we wrote our narrative for the Cal Humanities grant. And, here we are today, putting together an exhibit and building something from this. So, it did take a 3-4 semesters to really work this out. And the Autry came in. I remember you guys came into my class to help with the label writing. That's your specialty right there, and it was just, we started from nothing, that brick in that empty room and these boxes. And all of a sudden now we are moving into spaces that I think is very exciting for our students to even, to claim agency and to really move into these and be a scholar as we want them to be. So.
And I think we have some photographs of your students actually working with you and doing this work. Yeah, we've got,
so much fun. Right, and Azalea and Kendall Faulkner are another colleague on the grant with me, and Azalea had created some of these little like lesson plans, these little handouts and everything for them to look at. And they really, they rewrote these exhibits labels, 3 or 4 times just to get that, that skill down. And again, that's a transferable skill for any, especially right now with content writing online, and writing in that concise kind of way. So Kendall really stepped in and helped us out when we were moving into our exhibit phase, even before we planned it, so she was part of it too. But yes, Jair, the student on the right, Jair, is now in the credential program at Cal State LA. And that's really, yes. And that's so important that our students take this knowledge and share with their students and come back to Azalea and bring their students back in and work with her too. So.
Can we see the next slide, please? Thank you.
Yeah. You see that big thing in the back, the card catalog. They had so much fun.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the original Google. And I told them, I said, back in my day, this is what we researched. We didn't have all this internet and everything. And the freshmen were like, oh my goodness, everybody's so used to seeing it right online. And this really brought back the skills that we want our students, because not everything is online. What happens if you have an internet outage? You're going to have to go back to that card catalog. So Azalea really grounded them in good research skills. And I so appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on the skills because they're getting so much from the two of you, as well as Kendall. They're getting all these archival processing skills and label writing skills. But what are some of the other, I guess, the hot term is 21st century skills.
21st century.
And these transferable skills that they can use, whether they're going to become a professor of history, whether they're going to become an archivist or do something else completely different in the world.
One of those that Kendall really focused on with Azalea was this digital literacy skills. We wanted our students to acquire the primary source information, visual and digital literacy skills, so they can navigate these different research terrains. We wanted them to learn about collective memory and cultural heritage and the coalition building. Dymally was so much involved in Cesar Chavez's work, Dolores Huerta and others and everything. And it was really important for our students to, again, learn just basic organizational skills, how to collaborate, how to get along, and really just the importance of preserving narratives that are underrepresented or not told in a traditional landscape. Azalea, anything else?
I think the skills that they learned, like I mentioned before, I think just understanding what special collections and archives are and learning to appreciate that, and understanding that they're also, Dymally is a great example. He's a Cal State LA alum. That's representation. They can see themselves in him. Yes. They can see that what they're creating now is historically significant. So I think they can go out there and archive their own families' documents or their own communities' documents. It doesn't have to be tied to an institution, but they develop those skills and understanding that their communities matter and they're historically significant and their voices need to be told. And I think Dymally is a really great example of that.
Absolutely. Like, we want our students to go and take these skills back or wherever they're at and teach other people too, though. We don't ever want to hide, as an instructor and educator, I don't want to hide anything from my students. So the skills I have, I want to teach, or I want you to learn these skills. And working with Azalea, you know, she stresses that community collecting, the narrative, agency, and ownership. You know, educators, sometimes we gatekeep, we know that, and we shouldn't be gatekeepers. And Azalea's, you know, her staff and everything really supports this, you know, this community ownership and collecting and preserving of their own story. That's so important.
And we also talked about in the class how you can use the exhibit and the work that they did in a resume, in an interview, and talk about these types of projects. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in an archives. It could be a fellowship program. It could be, you know, it could be an interview where you're talking about what you did and the process that you did. And it wasn't, you know, you did research, but you also were in the process of creating and developing something that you're giving back to the community. So I think it's a really good way to incorporate in their resumes or interviewing.
Right.
I'd like to kind of pivot and talk about the work that Autry Classroom Curators did with you on this. So for those who are listening in and watching, who are not part of the Autry's education community, Autry Classroom Curators is one of our outreach programs that's run by the Autry's education department. So how can you explain to us how Autry Classroom Curators helped you scaffold this enormous project?
I can start with that. I want to acknowledge Veronica Proctor on that and her project-based learning skills that she taught me. And, you know, so she again produced this project-based learning form. She had me think about what we were going to do with this exhibit. Catherine, I remember, sent me a couple books just to read, to put it in perspective. And then you would have, you know, the Autry, you know, Veronica and Catherine come into my classroom and work with the students on better, you know, writing skills, which is important, but also conceptualizing, you know, content for an audience that is not a historian. We also had Josh Garrett Davis, the curator, come in and speak about his work with incarcerated, you know, mass incarceration, the carceral state. I also had Pep Williams come in and talk to them to put it into perspective. So the Autry education, from the basic step and everything, offers this project-based learning manual, if you will. And there's several documents that I've used in my own classes that kind of makes this project manageable, because if you look at it as on paper, it's so overwhelming. And for first generation students that have never been into an archive, they're like, why are we here? What am I doing in this chair right here? First of all, the chairs are nice. Azalea has done a great job making that space so welcoming. They don't want to ever leave. But, you know, again, it's scaffolding down so it's manageable. I don't want to overwhelm freshmen. I would never want to overwhelm my, you know, my juniors and seniors either. So, you know, scaffolding down with certain assignments, little minute assignments. Did you fill out this form? What can you tell me about this? Or where are you at in your box? Those little things helped really, you know, give leverage and build a concrete curriculum really for this project as well.
And how have students reacted to this experience? And I know we've got some videos and we can show that, but your reactions and your thoughts first.
One of my students in the Honors College wrote a primary source analysis, and she won the competition for the library. But since they were such a small class, I was able to be like, what can we change for next semester? What am I not doing that I need you guys to understand? And one of them was to really develop the reflection essay. I really wanted to see what students got from this. And again, I looked at my roster and not one of them was a history major, but these skills are transferable. I think if you're a computer science major, you should know about history. So I worked with a couple students in Honors College in the back room, and we just developed a better reflection essay. And again, a lot of them were like, I'm not a history major. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know we had a college, you know, archive. They didn't know who Marvin Dymally was, but they listed their skills that they learned. And a lot of it was just organization and accountability to finishing something that mattered. You know, and I don't want to ever have my students be like, I need to get an A and I'm stressed and everything. I want them to learn skills, you know. So I had a computer science major tell me, he's like, it's like building a computer program. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about this big data bit. And he's explaining it to me. And I was like, that's a great kind of like an analogy right there. And so the reflections demonstrated this, that they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. Some of them were nervous. They were scared that they couldn't complete it. They didn't want to like upset Azalea. If they did something wrong, you know, they were nervous. And I'm like, let's just breathe and just, you know, think about what you as a person, an individual in a freshman or sophomore position, how does this help your academic career? And a lot of it, again, was familiarity with research, primary sources. Kendall showed them, you know, where you find stuff. Azalea made it available. So these are skills that really, you know, offer them inquiry, but offer them like a foundation too. I wish I was that age getting into the archives. I didn't get into the archives until I was almost in grad school, my last year as a senior. And I was like, wow, I would have loved to have been doing this as a freshman to hone these skills down too. So they did, they took away so much that can benefit their own majors, which were nursing. This one student wrote about, you know, she's in the nursing program and she's like, oh, I learned organization. All the nurses have all these files and these folders and all this kind of stuff. And it just made her think. And that's what we want them to do, is think about something that has impacted your life. How has it impacted your, you know, journey in academia as well? Azalea, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've gotten very positive feedback from students. I think I've also learned through the process. I'm very reflective about it too. This is something new that we first have done. And when I mention it to other archivists, they're like, wow, you have 40 students working. That's kind of like, you know, not the norm. And I feel kind of crazy like doing that. But I think it was so much more that I learned, even though it might have taken us more prep and time to work with the students and have 40 in there. I really think it really benefited the students. And that's what I'm there for, and that's what the collections are there for. And I'm really all about exposing and demystifying special collections and archives. Also, the student assistants that I work with, they also were very they're learning a lot of skills too, and leadership skills in peer-to-peer, right? They're graduate students, but they're working with undergraduate students and showing them the ropes. And also talking about their projects and how to process, because they're also working, the student assistants and special collections work on great projects and develop their own virtual exhibits and things like that. So it was just a very good collaborative, I think, we project, and we all kind of learned that was very beneficial to the students, of course, but also to me as a professional in this field. So
I never did this before. So yeah, I've learned so much on, you know, how to facilitate something like this.
Yeah,
That was going to be my next question, because in all of our Autry Classroom Curators work that we do, you know, the students are, of course, the heroes of our work, but we always want the educators that we're working with, the classroom teachers, the professors, like the two of you, to learn something as well. So is there anything that surprised you that you learned or that you're carrying with you beyond this project?
Azalea.
yeah, I think for me is I would like to continue working on processing projects with other professors if they're interested, and through Dawn's word of mouth, I've actually had some professors approach me. I'm very interested in doing that. And like I said before, I felt like it's made me be working with students at Cal State LA has really made me a better professional, to tell you the truth. I always say that all the time, but it's really true. Seeing their enthusiasm with working with primary sources and working with a collection that reflects like their own communities. Like again, someone like Marvin Dymally, and they see themselves reflected in that. That to me is what I learned, and I want to do more of that and figure out how to give students that experience, not only on the research side and how to use it within your research or paper, but how to use this in creative projects like virtual exhibits, digital humanity projects, which are also equally important, right? And they're also very hands-on projects, and I want to learn how to develop more lesson plans with professors to incorporate primary sources. And now that we're making the Dymally collection more accessible, and going to digitize more of his photographs, and actually got a grant to process the entire collection, that will make for other projects possible with the campus, the community, faculty, you know, so those are the things that I'm looking forward to with the growth of this project that came out of it.
I think Cal State is a gem, to be honest with you. And I think it's a gem because we have people like Azalea Camacho and Kendall Faulkner that really want to be hands-on with our students. I have worked in a lot of archives across the South and even into DC. And again, there's this exclusivity that, you know, kind of bothers you as an educator. And I think Azalea, when she opened the doors, and allowed my students to come in and my colleagues to come in to share space, I think that's important in the growth of our young scholars. And I want to, be a part of that growth of this collection. We're working with Project Rebound to capture these stories of formerly incarcerated individuals. There's not an archive of that. And I think, a lot of my students, have family members that have served time, like my husband and everything. And again, we are living that sentence. And I think it's important to, continue to uncover a lot of these archival silences with our students. They were so excited just to be out of the classroom. Anything to be out of the classroom, students love, like a field trip. But then again, to sit down and actually, be a part of building something, I think is what they've taken it away. When I went to archive and process in Mississippi, that changed my life. And I want my students to experience that with my colleagues and the people I collaborate with as well. Yeah.
Well, I think we've got just time to see some of the reflection videos. So can we pop those up on the screen?
Hello, my name is Jasmine, and I'm a Cal State LA alumni and current USC student pursuing a Master's of Management in Library and Information Science. Today, I will be sharing about my experience at Cal State LA, which eventually led to me pursuing my master's degree at USC, and my work on the Dymally collection and exhibit. Working on the Dymally exhibit has been a rewarding experience for many Cal State LA students and myself, but most importantly, Dr. Dennis, Azalea, and Kendall, and the rest of the team that played a role in creating this exhibit was able to bring attention to various issues that Dymally faced during his service as Lieutenant Governor, Senator, and Representative of the state of California, and highlight many of those issues that are still present today. The exhibit was a success because it started a conversation, but highlighted the importance of collaboration and, most importantly, created a platform for the voices of those underrepresented to be heard. I want to thank the Cal State LA History Program and the library for allowing me to take part of this project, and I'm looking forward to the growth of this exhibit. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my experience today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob, for sharing those videos with us. And I think we can start moving into our Q&A portion. So thank you again, Dr. Dennis, and thank you, Azalea. So let's answer some of the questions from our guests. So one of the questions that we got is, let's see, how did the collaboration with Autry Classroom Curators come about?
I can speak on that. I took your 2018 Classroom Curators training workshop. And I remember, during that time, just learning and being exposed, with Catherine and some others, just learning how to curate, how to count words, as Eric would say, and everything. So it just became, I've always gone to the Autry. My son walked down there at the, in the lower part of the museum. So I've always liked the Autry Museum. And then to connect with the education department, who will come into my classroom and help me, work with exhibits and everything. I think it's phenomenal. So I've been working with the Autry Education, I think, for almost 4 years. So it was just that being invited and being accepted into that training academy that one summer in 2018. Yeah.
And someone has asked, what is the future for this project? What is the future for the archives?
So the future, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but we did get a Haynes Foundation grant to hire processing archivists to complete the processing of the collection. And we've actually sent out the photographs to be digitized through a vendor. And we're able to have some collaboration to make sure that those are digitized. And then hopefully.
Plans, yeah.
Huh?
Oh, I was going to say lesson plans too.
Oh,
Remember? Yes, yes. So Kendall, Faulkner, and Azalea and I this summer we're going to, work on some lesson plans too. We want to again, Azalea has a collection right now, that again will produce more of these more of this, just interest in getting our students into the archives. My personal interest in this collection is always with the incarcerated individuals. And so I would like to stay with that. If I find more letters, call me, let me know so I can, show my classes. But one of my colleagues, Dr. Sarah Pugash, is going to contribute to the exhibit as well. She's an expert in African history. And so Lynn Dymally, the daughter, went into her class and just, with the students just talked about what he did in Africa. So she is going to contribute to the exhibit. And I told her, I was like, publish, you're our expert at Cal State LA. You're my friend, Dr. Pugash, your students are my students. So we would like for other faculty members to take an interest as well and to really grow our students' exposure to Mervyn Dymally. But we are looking so forward to working with you on our lesson plans. And I can't wait. I'm excited to write seriously for the summer. So,
Yeah, we're looking to work together for those listening in. This topic, this great man actually hits 2nd grade, 4th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade standards. And so we have a plan.
Yes.
We're plotting and planning to create lessons for students in LA and California and beyond at all of these grade levels so that they get a chance to learn about this hidden history.
And, we want our students, again, to come back and help out and contribute to this new knowledge. The work that our students did is going to help Azalea with that finding guide and other things that are going to help her staff out too. So we want to keep that going. And I think this collection has such possibilities for student growth. That it's great.
And it also opened up growth for us in special collections and archives. Dr. Dennis had made great collaborations with the Los Angeles Reentry Program and with Project Rebound, which is at Cal State LA. And we're looking how to document the voices of those that were mass incarcerated and how to give them a voice, and incorporating Project Rebound and part of that, and incorporating
other narratives too.
So it's sort of developing another project out of this.
We don't have a collection of incarcerated stories yet, and Azalea has looked into that. The Autry has that exhibit, which we love, with Pep Williams, and that's been a staple in my curriculum since I found out about it. But when Azalea and I were talking about this, we want to share space. We want to again, not hide anything from anybody, and here's the tools that you need to do. So we look at it as a community project, maybe for fall too, with Azalea, maybe leading some workshops for the community on how to preserve their own narratives.
We've got a great question from Lynn. Is it possible to add to the archives by requesting Mervyn's FBI file under the Freedom of Information Act? I understand his FBI files are a wealth of information about his work and the times in which he served, which is
be requesting that as soon as we're done here. I'm on that, or Azalea can do that. Was that Lynn Dymally? Was that her? Yes. Hi, Lynn. I'm so grateful for you. Seriously, Lynn. I think she's great. But yes, we will find out how to do that. Lynn gave me photos to share with my students and everything too. We also have Jasmine Canick, who has some photos also. So absolutely, Lynn, we'll talk. I'll send you the email right away. We're going to be on that task for you. So,
and for those who don't know, Lynn is Mervyn's daughter.
She came to the exhibit, and her and Carlone Manuel were very supportive. And with this exhibit, we wanted to have the Trinidadian immigrant support of that, the community support. And I see so many historians of the past that don't talk to the community. They don't bring them into the planning stages. And I worked with Carlone, who's at LA, at LA Trade Tech every week on this. And so it was important that we were inclusive of Trinidadians here in Los Angeles, especially when we talk about immigration. We need to include them as well. So thank you, Lynn. I'm so glad you came. That's so nice of her.
And this is a pretty obvious question, but is there a link to the exhibition that we can share?
Yes, ma'am. Did you want me to put that in chat or something?
Sure.
I don't know.
Put
Okay.
that into the
Yeah, I pulled it up just to have my notes, you know, because I'm not working with any kind of notes. So
let's see, we've got some other questions. A question for me: what other programs has Autry Classroom Curators worked on? We have tackled so many different projects. Off the top of my head, just within the last couple of years, we've helped teachers work on projects about Navajo weaving, textiles, Black Panthers, the polio vaccine. We've got the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, immigration, the Chicano Civil Rights Movement, race and housing in 1960s California, and now this very important moment in history. And so those are just a few of the projects that Autry Classroom Curators, or ACC as we call it at the Autry, that they've worked on. And I know that they've worked on, I mean, you've worked with us on so many projects.
Yeah, I had my first exhibit, The Changemakers, where we honored Nipsey Hussle, always in my exhibits and my work. But I remember that, and I was so nervous because it was my first exhibit with you guys, and I was like, man, I'm at the Autry with my students. So again, you can't do this by yourselves. And one of the exhibit themes that we had, or the sections, was I am because we are. And Azalea and I talked about what that meant. And again, my success is again the success of the students and everything. I would not be here if Azalea didn't take a chance on me and work with Kendall too. So it's really a collaborative. It cannot be a effort by yourself and everything. And the students see that, and that's something that they can take back and work on their own collaboration skills with group work too.
And that's part of, there's another question asking how your work that you've done on processing all these archives and then creating the exhibition fits into the ethos of the Autry Education Department. And it's, I mean, bottom line, everything we do is based on relationship building and based on collaborative work. But also, I mean, this is such a great example of the work of that program, because it's learning histories, learning hidden histories, uncovering hidden histories, sharing voices that have often been silenced. But at the root of it is not doing it just to learn this history, but to gain these skills that both of you have spoken wonderfully about. Writing labels, sure, about choosing objects, but about organizing and learning about data and identifying themes, and just all of those skills.
One of the students, Sarah, that appeared in our Changemakers exhibit is now an intern at the Holocaust Museum. He won that position. I was so happy for him. And he built an exhibit as part of his design course. So he's not even a historian. And he built this virtual exhibit about anti-Semitic, you know, behavior. And he sent me an email, but he, you know, he's just one example of how many students, you know, that Azalea and I and my colleagues, we can reach with collaboration with the Autry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're very grateful for that.
And for those of you who were curious, so we've got up on this screen, this is the home page. Right? Is this the home page for the exhibition? So this is the home page for the exhibition. I don't know if the two of you want to mention anything about this page.
We just wanted you guys just to go through this. You know, we've created all these sections with our students. We pay a massive amount of, you know, respect to our Latino students that, you know, walked out and spoke about the conditions of, you know, the educational landscape in the 60s. So we owe those students, you know, we're very grateful for that. You know, again, we go through healthcare, we go through his coalition work. We also have letters written from men at this time to Dymally, and Josh had mentioned that that's very rare to have these letters come out of the state prison system. So we want this to be not only a mechanism for us to, you know, to share with our students, but to have, you know, researchers come too and really utilize this when it gets up and running and everything. Kendall did provide for further reading as a librarian. She's linked every one of the books that we have at the library. You know, so we all kind of contributed and built this, and it's still growing. In May, if you guys want to come back and look at it again, you'll see Dr. Pugash's section on Africa as well. So.
And this will be up forever, or this will be up at least for a while?
For a while, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
An end date to it. It's the first virtual exhibit that we produce. For the most part, it will probably live on the Special Collections and Archives website. So we're making space for virtual exhibitions, and this is where it will live. And it will feature other exhibitions that we use from various of our collections. But it should be up there for a while. We don't have an end date, so.
Okay. Because we're still waiting for, Sarah, Dr. Prugash's class to put them up too. And that's so great, and we have that event in May. We have one more event on May 6th with LARP, and you're going to hear from women and their experiences during COVID while incarcerated. So this project has really created another organic aspects that Azalea and I and Kendall and everybody else, we want to take advantage of and work with it.
And I think we have time for one last question. And so can the two of you, each of you, share a story about someone's first time working in the archives that resonated with you?
It was a freshman, and she was really quiet and real timid. I didn't know if I reached her yet. I probably annoyed her, so I wasn't really sure if, we're going to get one of these good reviews or not. But in the archives, I really got to know her. And I would sit next to her because she had the box of incarcerated letters that I was interested in. And she knew to raise her hand and flag me down. So I would go lightly jogging across the room to be all like gasping and whip out my phone camera. But you really get to know your students when you sit with them and work with them. And I worked alongside with her, and I got to understand that this box really impacted her because her family was also part of this incarcerated mass incarceration. And she didn't say anything. She didn't make it known, but to me. And so I shared my story about meeting my husband and our first date at, protesting against David Duke, the Klans member at CSUN. And, we were able to really kind of grow. And again, any educator that doesn't say that you don't learn from your students is not being truthful. I learned so much from my students. I learned everything. I mean, even me being on Zoom is something that my students have taught me, because I wasn't really even sure how to get on Zoom. So that one student that I sat with when we worked on these letters, I think it resonates with both of us. And she's emailed me about stuff. So, yeah.
Azalea, what about you?
For me is, I think when I first started at Cal State LA, one of my great things that I felt like I could bring to Cal State LA when I first started as an archivist was exhibits, because I felt like I was fun and I was good at it. And that kind of brought exposure, to students about it. And the first exhibit that I remember doing was on Ruben Salazar.
Oh, yes.
And it was with a couple of colleagues, and I was fairly new, but a student had reached out to me during that time and told me that she went to the event and she wanted to learn more about archives. She became a volunteer, she became a student assistant, and she's a librarian now at CSU Dominguez Hills.
Oh, yes.
She actually was a staff member as well at Cal State LA. So, and she also made me feel like I was having an impact on students that I honestly didn't really know. So when I say that I really learned about the students, or that they teach me things about my own self as a professional, that really resonated with me, because I felt like I was doing something right and engaging with students. And I work with her now. We're colleagues, we present and we do things and support each other. So it's great. And there's quite a few that go through that process and are in the field. And I'm so happy that I can call them colleagues, and we're working on projects together like this. So it's great. Yeah.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap up this fantastic conversation. And I just want to thank the two of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Azalea, for joining us today for Autry Artist Salons. And again, thank you all, those of you who have joined us today. Thank you for taking the time to hear more about the Autry's Education Department initiatives and projects. We are continuing to expand our distance learning platform with new lessons, topics, and modalities. And so I invite and encourage you in your community to visit the Autry's education site, which you can find at www.theautry.org/education, and I invite and encourage you to spend some time with this amazing online exhibition as well. Our next artist salon, it'll be with my colleague Karima Richardson, who is the Autry's Associate Curator of Archaeology and Osteology. She's going to be highlighting the Southwest Museum collection and speaking with Dr. Wendy G. Teeter, who's the Senior Curator of Archaeology for UCLA's Fowler Museum Repatriation Coordinator. Dr. Teeter also teaches at the American Indian Studies program and is co-principal, investigator, co-director of multiple UCLA collaborative projects with Indigenous communities on repatriation issues and cultural heritage protection. Trust me, you do not want to miss this conversation, so please register at the autry.org/artist salons. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Dennis. Thank you, Azalea. Everyone stay healthy, be well, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Bye.